This is the EVP Podcast.
I think you heard that correctly. You are listening to the EVP Podcast. I am Beaker.
I am Ghosty.
And we are bringing you more spooky December.
Woo!
I think we got this episode and one more.
Uno mas before the year end.
Before we are running away for Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah, we need Christmas, New Year break.
Yeah. We need a break from ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do some spooky ghost hunting.
Spooky ghost stuff.
On Christmas.
Because it don't stop.
Yeah.
Year round.
It's like a West Coast party. Because the West Coast party don't stop.
It don't stop.
All right. That was lame. But, we want to thank you for checking out last week's episode where we talked about that magical place.
That magic
with the stuff.
With all that stuff. What did we talk about again?
I don't fucking know.
You guys remember. You heard it.
Yeah.
You
were there.
Listen, duh.
You guys were there.
Thanks for listening to that.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Where are we at this week?
I don't know. What the hell did we talk about last week? Anyway,
Kay's Cross. Duh.
I know.
You were there.
I know. I was there. You were there. We were both there. We wanted to actually go there, but you can't. Don't go there.
Yeah, well, you can reach out.
Speaking of places that you shouldn't go to, let's not go to Dudley Town, Connecticut.
Why is that?
Because it's, one, apparently cursed.
And
super cursed.
Two,
and
it's off limits.
Yeah, it's super off limits.
Yeah.
No trespassing signs everywhere.
The whole city.
Yeah.
Off limits.
The whole city. It's not even really a city, though.
It's a sub-city.
It's just kind of there.
Yeah. It's like a neighborhood.
Place.
It's a neighborhood.
In Connecticut. It's in northwestern Connecticut, kind of on the border of New York, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. It's like a subsidiary of like this other big city, Cornwall.
Yeah, Cornwall.
Cornhole Wall.
Jackson. Cornhole Wall Jackson.
Yeah, Connecticut.
Yeah. That guy from The Patriot.
Oh, William.
Cornwall Jackson.
Cornwall. Okay.
William Wallace was Braveheart, dude.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, complete same actor. All right, cool.
Wasn't the same guy?
We're going to this. No,
he was playing the same character in two different movies.
No, those are historically accurate movies.
Yes.
Right. So, speaking of historically accurate, Dudley Town, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Not really a town, just kind of there in Cornwall. Now there was this dude named Thomas Griffiths. Yep.
Griffiths.
He was one of the first people to settle this region in 1740-ish. Now, there's no records to say that he ever lived where Dudley Town later stood, but he did own half the land there in 1741. So he was kind of, like I said, the first settler there. The reason why it's called Dudley Town is because about 7 years later, 6 if you do math, in 1747, a gentleman named Gideon Dudley came to the area. He also brought with him 2 of his brothers. And they have become known over the years as the men who brought a curse to this small town. So, again, we got this Gideon Dudley, his couple brothers.
So just 3 guys named Dudley.
3 guys named Dudley. So most of the people that lived in this little township were all part of this Dudley family, right? Which is why it was called Dudley Town. Makes sense.
Well, because it was actually called something else at the time.
Yeah, but not. But they took the name away, and they're like,
they just started calling it Dudley Town. But it was also just next to the city of Cornwall, so it was just like this neighborhood.
Yeah, it was like a suburb.
Yeah, and what was it? It was they say that these guys brought a curse with them, right?
Yes.
So according to what they thought it was that there was a guy Dudley who was beheaded by a king in England.
Like 200 years earlier.
Yeah, 200 years
250 years earlier.
Yeah, there was this guy by the name Dudley who was beheaded, and that there was this curse put against him and his family, and that these guys named Dudley came here, and ever since they showed up, everything just spiraled down.
So this dude, his name was Edmund Dudley, right?
Yes.
And the reason why he was beheaded is because he was supposedly involved in a plot to overthrow King Henry VIII.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And when this happened, that's when the curse was placed on him.
1510.
So when this went down, this is when the curse was placed on his entire family at the time. And it was stated that all of the Dudley descendants would be surrounded by horror and death.
Ooh.
Now, proponents of the curse claim that the Dudleys then began to experience a rather disquieting run of bad luck.
So you got Edmund's son. That was John Dudley, who he attempted to control the British throne by arranging for his son, Guilford, to marry Lady Jane Grey.
Now, we've talked about Lady Jane Grey before on the Tower of London episode.
Interesting. Very cool. So Guilford, he tried to marry Lady Jane Grey, next in line for the crown. After Edward the Sixth died, Lady Jane became the queen for a short time. And before the plan failed, ending with the execution of Lady Jane and the two Dudleys.
So, now, if you go back and listen to the Tower of London episode, we did talk a little bit about this, because Lady Jane is said to, and I think the Dudleys as well, are still said to haunt.
Full circle just now. Wow.
The Dudleys, I believe, I know Lady Jane for sure, but the Dudleys are said to or not the Dudleys, maybe the Dudleys, but Lady Jane for sure is said to haunt the Tower of London.
Very
So we just connected episodes.
Nice. So to make matters worse, Guilford's brother returned from France and, being a military officer, brought home a plague that he spread to his officers and troops. The sickness wiped out massive numbers of British soldiers and eventually spread throughout the country, killing thousands.
Now, John Dudley's third son, Robert, Earl of Leicester.
Worcestershire.
Yep, Worcestershire sauce. He was a favorite of Elizabeth I, who wisely decided to leave England and travel to the New World. This is John Dudley. This is Robert. He decided to leave England, travel to the New World. It would be his somewhat luckier descendant, William, who would settle in Guilford, Connecticut. Three of William's descendants, Abel, Brazili, and Gideon, they would later buy the plot of land in Cornwall Township that ended up becoming Dudley Town.
So while there were undoubtedly some grim events that surrounded the Dudley family in England and France, questions have been raised as whether or not any curse really followed them to America. The question has been raised because in order for the curse to have been passed along and to account for the haunting of Dudley Town, then William Dudley would have had to have been the son of Robert, Earl of Leicester.
Yes.
But he wasn't Robert Dudley.
But he wasn't.
Robert Dudley had only two sons, and one of them died while still a child. The other went to Italy, and while he had children, all of them remained in that country. This means that there was no link between William, his sons, who founded Dudley Town, and any so-called curse. So no, that curse did not follow them because they were not related.
But it makes for a great story.
Yeah, so it makes sense why people would think that and try to link that together. Before the internet, you know what I mean?
Right. Before the internet. Everything that you read on the internet is true.
Well.
So everything we're telling you right now is true.
For the most part.
Now, we may have established the fact that Dudley Town was never actually cursed here, but that doesn't mean it was not tainted in some other way. Okay? Tainted. Love.
Tainted love.
Sometimes I feel I've got to run away. Now, there are many places across the country where odd things happened and where the land does not seem quite right. Now, records indicate that the land around Dudley Town was once Mohawk Indian tribal grounds, but tell us little else before the coming of the first settlers. Now, this region has gained a chilling reputation over the years, and there are some strange and weird stories and disappearances there in Connecticut in the past some way.
Connected to this town.
Yeah, there's a lot of going on, a lot of different happenings or random shit that's happened in this town.
Which is just coincidence or imagination.
Right. But this is part of the reason why, hey, maybe this place is cursed.
It could be. So, in the early 1740s, Thomas Griffiths, he bought a parcel of land that would later be considered the first lot in Dudley Town. The land today looks as much as it did when Griffiths first came here. It was came there.
Went there.
It was covered in thick forest, and the ground is strewn with rocks, and the nearby mountains also heavily shadow the area. So there's really hardly any sunlight that hits the area. The woods are so deep, and it's like...
They're really ominous. They're kind of scary.
Very ominous. And they say that the type of rocks, the minerals that there are there, just the little bits of light that penetrate into there, it kind of sparkles. And then
Sparkle.
They call it the dark entry forest.
That sounds
very
inviting. No, inviting.
But that's because it's very dark because of all the shadows from the mountains and all the forest and everything.
Touch you.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, in 1747, Gideon Dudley bought some of the land from Griffith to start a small farm. By 1753, Gideon's two brothers, Barzillai, and Abel, ABL. Yeah, they were from Guilford, Connecticut. They also purchased land nearby. Now, a few years later, a Martin Dudley from Massachusetts also moved to the area, but was from a different line of the family. He later married Gideon's daughter.
Incest much?
It sounds like a little bit.
Okay, one thing that should be mentioned was that Dudley Town was never an actual town, and it was more isolated part of Cornwall. The village rested in the middle of three large hills, which accounts for the recollections of it being nearly dark at noon. And the area for farming, as apparent by the rocks that were used to build the foundations and stone walls that still stand today. So it's just not very good for farming, being that it's very rocky. And despite though the settlers began to trickle into the area, and the Tanner family, the Joneses, the Pattersons, the Dibbles, and the Porters all took up residence here. So now you got all these families coming here besides just the Dudleys. The community grew even larger after iron ore was discovered. Nearby farming became secondary concern. However, there were never any stores, shops, schools, or churches in Dudley Town because it was pretty small, I'm pretty sure.
I think there was like a max total of like 26 families in this town.
Yeah. So provisions had to be purchased in nearby towns. When one died, a trip to Cornwall was necessary because in addition to there being no church in town, there were no cemeteries either. So the population of Dudley Town was never large, and according to an 1854 map, the peak number of families who lived there only reached 26. I'm reading as if I'm there.
I know.
I'm not there.
You're astral projecting.
I'm here.
Not there. Now, in spite of all of these things, the town did thrive for a little bit of time. Dudley Town was noted for its timber, which was burned and used to make wood coal for nearby Litchfield County iron furnaces in Cornwall and other towns. The furnaces later moved closer to the railroads and the more industrial towns, and the lumber was no longer needed. Iron ore was used from the area for a time, and there were 3 water-powered mills in Dudley Town as well. Now, most of the mills eventually closed because of the long trip down the mountain to deliver their goods.
Yeah.
So this is just like this whole town had resources, but it was so inconvenient at the time for anyone to get there or get the resources out.
Yeah, sounds like a pain in the ass. So despite the outward signs of prosperity, there were strange deaths and bizarre occurrences at Dudley Town from the start. Some historians have attempted to downplay the unusual events in recent years. They will debunk the legends of the town by first stating how few people there ever were how few people there ever were who lived there, and then will try and downplay the disappearances. Damn, that was hard to spit out. The cases of insanity and the weird deaths, as if such things happen all the time. And perhaps they do, but why so many unusual happenings in such an isolated area with so few people living in it? The number of deaths have occurred here, there would not be such a high number in a larger town, but in this small community, one can't help but wonder what exactly was taking place. There are also an inordinate number of people who went insane in the area. as well as people who simply vanished. In addition to those who were documented, it's no wonder, bogus or not, that a story started about Dudley Town curse.
Okay, so 3 of the Dudleys moved out of the region and lived a long, full life, dying of natural causes and forever diminishing any possibilities of a curse. Only Abel Dudley remained in the town, and after a series of reverses, lost his entire fortune and his mind. Now, he ended up dying in 1799 at the age of 90, and he was no longer able to pay his debts. The town took his property, sold it, and made him a ward of the town. Toward the end, Abel was senile and insane and would not be the last to suffer from this affliction.
So did that mean he was just sent to the insane asylum or something? A ward of the town?
Ward of the town. Well, there wasn't an asylum or anything there. It was basically just like the townspeople are just taking care of this man. I
was going to say, like, everybody just kind of takes turns taking care of him until he dies.
Probably. They might have had they didn't have like a jailhouse or anything. They probably just had like some abandoned house. They took his house from him, but let him live there still. But they're like, it's our house.
Okay.
Go check on the old man. I don't know exactly how that went down, but there wasn't like any other buildings there. There was just like houses from what I understand.
All right. So in 1792. 7 years before Abel Dudley passed away, his good friend and neighbor, Gershon Hollister, was killed while building a barn at the home of William Tanner. That was Abel's closest neighbor. Tanner was also said to have gone insane, although likely from old age and senility rather than from supernatural influences. He lived to the age of 104 and, according to records, was slightly demented at the time of his death. There have been stories that have circulated claiming that Tanner told other villages of strange creatures that came out of the woods at night. If this is true, there is no way for us to know if these creatures were products of his senility, his craziness, or if he really was seeing some weird shit.
I mean, he was 104.
104, but how long was he talking about seeing weird shit coming out the woods at night?
Probably all the time.
Probably all the time. You heard it here first, folks.
he was nutter. He was a bit nutter. Now, Nathaniel Carter family moved to Dudley Town in 1759 and lived in a house once owned by Abel Dudley before he was made a ward of the town.
Oh, so they took over his house. Okay.
It was a house that was once owned by him. These people moved in.
Oh, okay. So he probably had multiple properties.
Probably.
They took everything away.
It was Dudley Town, so he probably had a couple houses or something. Now, there was a mysterious plague that swept through Dudley Town and Cornwall and took the lives of the Admiral Carter family, relatives of Nathaniel, and saddened by the loss, they moved to Binghamton, New York, from Dudley Town in 1763. Those who believe in the curse say that the taint of Dudley Town followed after them, but their tragic fate was actually far too common during the early days of the frontier. The Carters moved to the Delaware wilderness in the heart of Indian territory, and during an attack, Indians slaughtered Nathaniel, his wife, and an infant child. Now, the Carters' other 3 children were abducted and taken to Canada, where 2 daughters were ransomed. The son, David Carter, remained with his captors, married an Indian girl, and later returned to the United States for his education. He went on to edit a newspaper and become a justice of the Supreme Court.
So I've heard other stories where he got killed, where he was scalped and killed.
It's very possible.
And that the other two daughters were also later killed. So I've heard multiple stories about that. Don't know what's true.
It's all true because it's on the internet.
Because it's on the internet, but I've seen everything on the internet with different stories.
But it's all true.
So I've heard, yeah.
Nobody can be lying because it's on the internet, just like us.
Everything we've heard is true.
You're listening to us on the internet, so everything we're saying is true.
Yeah, both sides.
So who knows what actually happened? Nobody knows.
Right.
The shadow knows.
But so there's another bizarre tragedy that affected one of the most famous residents of the region, General Herman Swift, father of Taylor.
Yes, he's actually the great-great-grandfather. He was definitely a Swiftie, though.
He had to be. So he had served in the Revolutionary War under George Washington in 1804. His wife was Sarah Fay. she was struck by lightning standing out on her front porch, just standing there.
She survived.
She was killed instantly.
She was killed instantly.
And the general went insane, and then he died soon after. Many have dismissed this incident as not being connected to the other unusual events, saying that Swift did not actually live in Dudley Town, but on Bald Mountain Road, where his house still stands, and that he only went insane when he became old and senile. But in an area with this sparsely populated, the records indicated 3 people to have gone insane in the space of less than a half century. Now, could this be mere coincidence? And does a person being struck by lightning while standing on their front porch qualify as being unusual? Probably coincidental. Being where the area is, I could see if there was not a lot of things there. If it was pretty flat and there being a storm, she just kind of walked out.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this at modern day times, like through modern day eyes, right?
Yeah.
Now let's travel back in time here to the.
You got to bleed out the demons back then.
1700s, 1800s.
Yeah.
Where you don't really know a lot of stuff.
Right.
This isn't common. So when people are just going insane, possibly of old age. I mean, we talked about in other episodes people being thrown in insane asylums that just have like Alzheimer's.
Right.
Right. So, and they don't know any better. They don't really know what Alzheimer's is back then. They're just like, okay, this guy's possessed. He's crazy or whatever.
Right.
He masturbates. Throw him in a.
He's a masturbator.
Yeah.
Get rid of him.
That was another episode we talked about. That was one of the things that would get you thrown into the insane asylum.
Yep.
So, I mean, it could be, looking at it today's eyes, it could be coincidence, but back then they're probably like, oh shit, this place is cursed.
Has to be.
Now, there was another famous personage allegedly connected to Dudley Town. Their name was Horace Greeley, who was the editor and founder of the New York Tribune, or so the stories of the curse go. In this case, the story deserves to be debunked. Greeley married a young woman named Mary Young Cheney, who the stories of the curse say was born in Dudley Town. Now, in truth, Mary was actually born and raised in nearby Litchfield and never lived in Dudley Town. She left the area as early as 1833 and went to live in a vegetarian boarding house that was owned by Dr. Graham of the Graham Cracker fame.
Crazy.
And became involved in the popular wellness movement of the time. Now, while there, she met and later married Horace Greeley. And in 1872, Greeley ran for president against Ulysses S. Grant and lost the election. A short time before it, Mary suffered from an attack of lung disease and died. Her death occurred in New York City, where her husband and 2 daughters, Ida and Gabrielle, in attendance, where they lived. Okay, she was buried in Greenwood Cemetery. The legend claims that she committed suicide, but this was not the case. Greeley himself died 1 month later, and the electoral votes that he received in the election were distributed to minor candidates.
Yeah, because those were important.
So it's just like all this, so far, everything that we've talked about, it's just random happenstance that happened to these people. Happenstance. Random happenstance.
Is that a word?
Yes, it is, actually.
Oh, okay.
Look it up.
You would win in Scrabble then.
Probably not. But it's just random shit that's happening to people that lived near Dudley Town, not necessarily in Dudley Town.
Yeah, they're just trying to connect dots that weren't really there. But after the Civil War, Dudley Town began to die, and many of the villagers...
Happenstance.
Look at you go. Look at you go. So Dudley Town began dying after the Civil War, and many of the villagers simply packed up and moved away. The demise of the town itself is hardly surprising, whether you believe it is the curse or not. The geographical location was foolhardy at best. So, surrounded by hills and at elevations more than 1,500 feet, there was little chance that a good crop would ever grow and sustain life in the village. The winters were harsh, and even the hardy apple trees were stunted from the months of cold. And as mentioned already, the soil was rocky and the area was plagued by almost too much water. So it kind of like made little pools and swampy areas, and just it was too damp, and so just not good for growing crops. That's for sure. But even if you overlook that whole idea of an actual curse and admit that the location of the town just probably was the reason why it sucked so bad, the sheer number of unusual deaths,
excluding Mary
Greeley, and mental conditions in such an isolated area more than suggests that something out of the ordinary was occurring in the little town. And no matter how hard the debunkers try to discard the next mysterious event to occur in Dudley Town, their efforts fall short.
Okay, so this event happened in 1901, at a time when the population of Dudley Town had dwindled away to almost nothing. One of the last residents of the town was a man named John Patrick Brophy. Tragedy visited swiftly and in several blows. First, his wife died of consumption, which was not uncommon in those days, and there was nothing strange about her ailment, as she had been suffering from it for years. Now, this did not lessen Brophy's grief, and soon after, he was further stricken when his 2 children vanished into the forest just a short time after the funeral. And while their disappearance could have been voluntary, they have been accused of stealing sleigh blankets, which was a minor offense at the time. There's nothing to indicate that it actually was. They vanished and were never found, never heard from again. And shortly after, the Brophy's house burned to the ground in an unexplained fire. And not long after that, Brophy himself vanished into the forest, and he also was never seen again.
So I wonder if his kids most likely were just like, because it sounds like this dude was probably suffering from like some kind of depression already, and probably wasn't taking care of his kids. And I bet you anything, these kids were like, okay, you know what? Dad ain't gonna take care of us. I think we should probably like just pack up and keep walking. So I don't know if they actually like disappeared, because there's probably no way of keeping track of anybody back then.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure they just went for a walk and just never came home on purpose. On purpose.
Especially if they stole some sleigh blankets.
Yeah, and they were young at the time from what I was reading, and so they were probably just more scared to face the law than, you know.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
But the fact that, like, even Brophy. The dude himself, like, his house burned down, he probably did it himself.
He probably did it.
It's a possibility he did it himself. We don't know. But the fact that he also disappeared and was never heard from again, a little mysterious.
Or he just go for a walk.
Or he just went for a walk. I don't know.
He just went to the next town over, and everybody just tells all these weird stories about him. And he's just hearing it all, like, that was me, actually.
Because they didn't know different.
Yeah. They didn't have the internet.
They didn't have GPS trackers.
It's like living in Tooele.
Yeah. There's no internet out there.
So by the early 1900s, Dudley Town was completely deserted. The remaining homes began to fall into disrepair and ruin, and soon the forest began to reclaim the village that had been carved out of it.
About time.
Mm-hmm. But there was still one other death that proponents of the curse have connected to Dudley Town, and while the curse may be unlikely, it does mark one additional case of insanity for an isolated region that has already been riddled with them.
All right, so around 1900, there's a dude named Dr. William Clark who came to Cornwall and fell in love with the forest.
So I heard it was around, I've also heard about this being 1920.
So somewhere between 1900 and 1920.
Yeah, around then.
Somewhere in this 20-year period, Dr. Clark came in, loved the forest, and he liked the quiet country life. Clark had been born in 1877, and he grew up on a farm in Tenafly, New Jersey. He later became a professor of surgery and taught at Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons, as well as earning a reputation as the leading cancer specialist in New York. He purchased 1,000 acres of land in the wilds of Connecticut, which included Dudley Town, and began construction of his summer and vacation home there. Over the next number of years, he and his wife, Harriet Bank Clark, visited the house on weekends and during the summer until it was completed. After that, it became mostly a holiday house for short trips in the summer and for Thanksgiving. Together, they maintained an idyllic second life near Dudley Town until 1918.
Okay, maybe this is where... Okay.
So 1900, he came 1918.
Yeah. Okay.
They built their summer home in what was Dudley Town in 1918. Some shit went down.
Okay. Go on.
Okay, on one summer weekend, Dr. Clark was called away to New York on an emergency. His wife stayed behind, and according to story, he returned 36 hours later to find that she had gone insane, just as a number of previous residents of the village had done. Now, the story also claims that she had told of strange creatures that came out of the forest and attacked her. Shortly after, she ended up committing suicide. We don't know how much truth there is to this actual tale here. We don't know whether or not this actually went down, but this is kind of what's going on, or what people are saying happened. Now, perhaps more than some of you like to believe, it has been recorded that for several years before her suicide, Miss Clark suffered from a chronic illness. There's nothing to indicate what this ailment might have been, or whether it was a physical or mental one. Just to be on the safe side, though, the mentally stable individuals do not ordinarily take their own lives. As for whether or not she saw strange creatures in the woods, well, we will never really know for sure, even if we disregard this. We have one more suicide that occurred to a resident of the nearly non-existent village of Dudley Town.
Well, all right. Well, undoubtedly shattered by his wife's suicide, Dr. Clark continued to maintain his house in Dudley Town and continued to visit. A number of years later, he remarried and returned to stay at his summer house until a larger home was completed nearby in 1930. And in 1924, he and his wife, Carita, as well as other doctors, friends, and interested landowners, formed the Dark Entry Forest Association.
Sign me up. I want to be part of this.
So this is everybody that lived in the area,
Quite
all
possibly.
these rich-ass people.
Most likely.
So it was designed to act as a forest preserve so that the land around Dudley Town would remain forever wild.
I like it.
They held their first meeting in 1926 with 41 members. Dr. Clark died in Cornwall Bridge in February of 1943. Carita passed away 5 years later. A number of their children and family members still reside in the area. So I don't know if this really says anything about the town claiming one more life.
Nope, sure doesn't.
No.
But we put it in there anyways.
Because might as well.
We're totally
Because he
going
died.
off of notes that we wrote.
Because he died.
Yeah, he died in 1943, so the forest claimed him. Now today, Dudley Town is mostly deserted except for the curiosity seekers and tourists who come looking for thrills. The Dark Forest Entry Association still owns most of the land the village once stood on. There are a group of homes on Bald Mountain Road that are very secluded from the main roads, and they belong to the closest residents. These local mountains that nothing's... the locals... I can read.
Yeah.
My contacts are going
The
fuzzy.
local mountains.
The local mountains. The locals maintain that nothing supernatural takes place in the region, and perhaps they are right. It seems unlikely that the curse of Dudley Town ever really existed, but on the other hand, there is something strange about such a small area with so many disappearances, unusual deaths, suicides, and cases of insanity. The stories of a curse had to have gotten started for some reason, and perhaps this is why.
Yeah, so they start talking about these ghost stories around the 1940s. And it was just at this time that visitors to the ruins of the village began speaking of strange incidents and wispy apparitions in the woods.
The watchers in the woods.
Even today, those who have visited the place boast of paranormal photographs, overwhelming feelings of terror, mysterious lights, sights and sounds, and even of being touched, pushed, and scratched by unseen hands. Some researchers refer to the area as a negative power spot, or a place where entities enter this world from another side. They say that this may explain the strange events in Dudley Town's history, like the eerie reports, the strange creatures, and perhaps even the outbreaks of insanity and madness. The place is often thought of as a tainted...
It's tainted.
It's tainted. in some ways, as if the ground has somehow spoiled here.
There.
Or
here.
here.
Or there.
Or perhaps, or was it just sour all along?
Sour grapes. Now, some historians and debunkers dismiss such reports and theories and maintain that just because the so-called curse of Dudley Town doesn't exist, that nothing strange ever occurred here either. However, an open-minded look at some of the things that have happened do seem to show this is a strange place and one that has been an enigma from the earliest days of its history. Whether or not there is any truth to the accounts of people who have come here since the days when the village was abandoned is up to you to decide.
So I was also hearing about that there are animals there. Animals don't like being on the property. Of not the property, but just the area. That birds don't fly in there. Birds don't sing. You can't hear birds in the area. So birds don't fly in there. If you bring in certain animals to the area, like some of the farmers had animals there, they slowly start disappearing. Like they just want to be gone. Like they, not like there's signs of them dying or getting killed there. Like they found a way out and they just booked it because they want to be off the land.
Interesting.
So it makes me wonder if this area has like a weird magnetic pull or just like a weird magnetic feel to it, kind of like how Skinwalker Ranch does. How there's just some areas that are cursed, or not cursed, but just there's something weird about it.
Yeah, probably.
That's kind of what I got to feel when I was hearing that part of it. That maybe, not necessarily like the land is cursed, but just that. For one, yeah, you can't really grow shit here. But for two, maybe there's just got some weird magnetic pull to the area.
Maybe.
Makes it real weird. Makes it real, real weird. Or maybe aliens, man.
Aliens.
Could be aliens. Lizard people.
Most likely.
The lizard people in the
Sasquatch.
Could be squatches.
Oh, squatches.
Those rock squatches.
Yes.
Swamp rock squatches.
I don't know. I would love to go visit here.
You can't though. No trespassing.
Look, that's what the sign says.
Yeah.
And these people are totally taking a picture of themselves
with their faces
next to the no trespassing sign. That's smart.
Because if we did that, we wouldn't show our faces.
No, we'd block them out.
And we would talk about ourselves as if we have gone and if we had seen this.
Yeah. We use fake names.
Yeah. Yeah, or you'd say someone else did it and that this is what they told us.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely that's what we would do.
What do you think about this town?
Here's the deal.
Tell me everything you know.
Everything I know is, I want to say this place is probably just all coincidental. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, a lot of random shit happened to a very small group of people. But it was also like the 1700s. Like, they were very isolated. There wasn't a lot of medicine there. Like, they had to go to another town.
I don't think there was a lot of ghost towns back east like there's ghost towns here in the west. No. So it was probably strange for them to experience a ghost town.
Right.
Where here it's like common along the Wild West. There's ghost towns every so often.
Yes.
And out there back east, they probably don't experience much of that.
Yeah, I don't really hear about ghost towns that way.
Exactly.
That
so when there is one, it's probably a big deal. Probably real scary for them.
But again, it is isolated. They're away from everything else. Like, they had to travel to another town for hospitals and shit like that.
Well, yeah, because somebody probably thought they found a good thing up there. When you got
two different guys, that one was 90 and one was 104, they probably had dementia or Alzheimer's. Exactly. And so they're probably just talking out their asses. And people are like, oh, my God.
And these people probably put a lot of money into that land thinking that it was like, it was going to be prosperous. And
they probably lost their asses on it. So, like, it's cursed.
Well, I guarantee what probably happened is they put all their life savings into buying a lot of land for real cheap. And then they got there hoping to, like, grow things and start this whole village and make prosperity happen. They're probably like, oh, shit, this is kind of a bad deal.
Probably.
And so they try to make the most. I think they tried to make the most out of what they were dealt, and it just kept failing on them.
I do know that this place did pique the interest of the Warrens because this is how I heard about that.
And what did they say about it? It was covered in what?
It was
covered in what?
In a book?
Demons.
Covered
in demons.
It was probably not that much.
Yeah, that's what they said, though. The Warrens said this place is so bad.
Did they?
They sure did. And they said it was riddled.
There's demons. Well, there's demons everywhere, according to them. But
I bet you there was some ghosts there.
There's some good old Warren's books on the Amazon, on the what is it, Audible?
Yeah.
But I was listening to this one's called Ghost Hunters. It's like the first book in a 6-book series. But one of the chapters was on Dudley Town. I'm like, this sounds really cool. So we brought you a wonderful episode on Dudley Town.
Dudley Town.
Dudley Town. Don't go there or do and get arrested.
If you've been to Dudley Town and got away with it, we want to hear about it.
Yeah, so we can rat you out.
Yeah, so we can tell
to the local authorities here.
Send us your pictures with your faces.
Yeah, twice. And then after you do that, check out our social media. Oh, if you want to do that, though, if you want to send us those pictures.
Where are they going to send it?
They're going to send it to the evp.pod@gmail.com. And then they're going to go over to Facebook and Instagram. Check out our social medias there, evp.pod, where sometimes we have reaction videos and other stuff.
And funny memes.
And funny memes.
Yeah, you better like that shit.
Yeah, twice. And then also, you can go to ghostup.com. Follow our affiliate link, which is also found on our social media.
What are they going to buy
there? Ghost hunting gear.
You damn right they are. You better buy some ghost hunting
gear. Yeah. Buy it. Do the ghost hunting. Christmas is right around the corner.
It's Christmas time, folks.
Yeah. What better way to say someone you love them by buying them ghost hunting gear?
And taking them ghost hunting.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah, all year round. Buy them a pass.
Yeah. Twice all year round. Buy him a pass to wear.
I don't know. I was just talking shit.
It sounds good. I like it.
But all right, guys. Next week, maybe we'll bring something Christmassy to the table before we take our little Christmassy break.
Christmas soda.
I think we should.
Some root beer Coke mix.
Yeah. Ghosts don't play that.
Peace out, butterflies.
This is the EVP Podcast.